So today we have Carlos Levianos, who a friend of mine who we worked together a couple of years back. We won't say the year because it's been a while. But he agreed to help us out and come and do a little talk about the kind of work that he's working on recently. But before we do that, why don't we talk a little bit about yourself?
Okay.
You said you're from El Paso.
I'm from El Paso, born and raised here in El Paso.
And what high school did you go to then?
I went to Cornell High School.
Okay. So at high school, did you take any drafting courses or
Courses. Can you guys hear me?
Now you don't. This is gonna be fun. Okay, so drafting courses. Back then it was hand drawing, if I would be mistaken.
Oh, it's not working. Hold on. Hello? There we go. Yeah, so I took some drafting courses and then drawing courses, art courses, that type of thing, and that's kind of was part of my education before I went off to tech in high school.
When you were in high school, did you already know that you wanted to pursue a career in architecture?
I had a pretty good idea. I grew up with my grandparents, and my my grandfather's brother was an architect in Juarez. Actually, he was the first architect in Ciudad Juarez. He started the AIA chapter in Juarez, and he would always take me over to his office, and that always brought, I've always liked art, and I like math, and a little bit of science, and that kind of led me to just a little bit. that led me to pursue the idea of becoming an architect.
Was there obviously going to see his projects must have been very impressive. Was there one of the projects that really influenced you and you said, this is it, this is what I want to do?
You know what, he was a modernist. He was coming out of that school of first modern architecture in Mexico. And I didn't realize it at that time, but I thought that, for whatever reason, it always drawn my eye. And his house was a cubist, and it was multi-level, and I was trying to, and I really enjoyed it because as a kid, you want to go upstairs, downstairs, and run around. And his house was always, so we could actually play in it. And that's kind of, I started to understand, subconsciously, that's good architecture.
Great.
Yes.
And so you decided to go to Texas Tech in Lubbock.
Correct.
Obviously back then there was no school here.
Yeah.
How did you decide that was the place you wanted to go?
In reality, it was that it was the closest architectural school, and it was in Texas, and they offered me a scholarship. So I took the opportunity and I went to Texas Tech.
Wonderful. And so when you studied there, what was one of the things that really influenced you from being at Lubbock at the school that has influenced you and has been a big part of what you do?
I think that I did a broad study abroad, and I lived in Spain for about 6 months. And yeah, go ahead.
Here, they show you how to use it. Okay.
Hello? Okay. So when I was studying abroad, I traveled all over Europe, but one of the places that I really enjoyed or that I learned a lot was when I visited Granada and the Alhambra in Granada, which is basically a compound, or let's call it a palace for the Moorish king back in whenever. But I think that the thing that draw my eyes, that I bring back now to my architecture, is that it was that seamless connection between interior and exterior space that I think that we need more of in architecture, because there's also was a microclimate that they created with these shallow water pieces. And so even the exterior spaces were just as important as the interior spaces. So it was kind of, you could be outside or inside and you didn't notice, and the buildings were really open to the environment. And I think that was one of the places that I visited while there that really influenced what I'm trying to do now today.
Right. So tell me about this particular slide that we're looking at here.
So basically, I guess that transition between indoor and out. You can't build the Alhambra in El Paso with the very limited budgets that we have here. It's very hard, especially if you're trying to build with $100 to $150 a square foot. It's kind of impossible to do these palaces, But you can take something. But I took the idea of the patio, the courtyard, water features, and try to incorporate that into my architecture. Okay.
So this is the animal hospital on the east side. Where could we find this?
It's close to Montana, and what's the intersection? And Wedgwood, I believe. Okay, Montana, Wedgwood.
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit about it. I had a client, Dr. Garza, and his wife. They approached me to do a new clinic. Sorry. So this is what their clinic was like. You can see here on the right. Very old building, built, so they wanted to expand and make a bigger clinic and go from like 1,500 square feet to like 5,000 square feet. But it was kind of a challenge because there was an easement that ran in between the property. They didn't have enough parking, and it was hard to fit on either side. We couldn't fit the whole program for the doctor.
What did you say when you saw that big old easement right there, interfering with your project?
I was like, what am I going to do now? How am I going to fit all this? Are we going to do a 2-story space, or are we going to are we going to try to get rid of the easement, which was El Paso, what was it, the AT&T easement, and they usually won't let you do anything with that. I mean, that's locked in place. They won't move it. It's way too expensive to move it. So it was a big challenge.
Wow. And so I see the slide there shows that's the original. That's the original?
That's the original building they were working out of.
Okay. And so did you immediately tell them this has to go?
Well, I told them that I would look at it to see if it was feasible to leave it. But after looking at it and coming up with a concept of what we wanted to do, it was clear that it had to go and we had to start from scratch. But the challenge was that he wanted to operate during all this time that we were going to do construction. One of the big challenges is that he wanted to keep operating and never close. So we had to work around that. At the end, we added a trailer out at the job site, and he worked out of a trailer. And then when half of it was open, he would use half of the building and out like that.
Okay.
So here's the solution. So basically, I created this, that same idea that I learned was to create this courtyard that would be kind of the glue that. So basically, the glue that held this together was the courtyard idea, and that's how we came up for this project.
Before you go,
yeah.
When did you, or when was the moment where you went, this is where I can use my courtyard idea?
You know what? I wasn't even thinking about the courtyard. I wasn't thinking about the courtyard. It just kind of happened that once I started looking at the program of spaces and how things need to function, it just made sense to do it. And I think it's just something subconsciously that I've always thought about, but I don't approach my projects that's what I'm going to do. It just, for whatever reason, appears in the project, and it seems to be an element in the projects that I do that always help me as an organizing element for my architecture. So basically, the form of the project was that he really was in love with this metal roof system that he wanted to use. That was kind of the only thing aesthetically and he wanted rock. So that was kind of the starting point of what this was going to look like. But I did want to, there was an issue with the orientation of the building, so we wanted to have a nice entrance, of course, to draw people in. And then, and if you look at it and you walk, it seems like it's just one building. That was the other thing, that even though we have this easement running through the property, it's going to seem like one continuous building. So here's basically how the program was split. One of the issues that the doctor mentioned seemed to work with the space that we had. And there's also a catwalk or a covered patio at the top that connects these two, at least by the roof, so it always almost seems like one seamless program around the project. So this is kind of one of the things that the courtyard allowed is to have natural light to come into the building. And so here we're looking at the lobby, and so that's one of the things that he really liked about it. That it was a really pleasant place to bring your animals and you feel comfortable. And when a patient, parent, or the people bringing in the animals feel comfortable, the dogs seem to be also, or the pets seem to be more patient and calm. So this is So here's the exterior courtyard that was created. We even added a small door so that it would feel more relaxed and inviting. And so this is where people come out when they're a little stressed about what's going on with their animals to kind of relax. And also the people that work there enjoy it. And it's not the Alhambra, you don't have all these things, but you still have this space that's created by a series of buildings.
I noticed on the previous slide that you have a prep area. Did you have some health issues that you had to address when you were? Yeah,
they have a lot of what's it called, requirements that the doctor had that we had to meet based on animal health and not having things spread around. So there was a really logical, and that was the most important thing to the doctor was. How is this thing going to operate? He was more about the functionality of it, and his wife was more about, I want it to look pretty, so we had to kind of always play that battle between both.
Is she a veterinarian also?
Huh? No, she's not a veterinarian, she's just his wife. And, but that happens, yeah, but she's an important part of what happens with him, and she helps him.
So in working with them, how did you deal with I'm assuming they both had different personalities, or what was your relationship with both your clients?
Like I said, I think the doctor he was very keen on how this thing was going to function, how we're going to be able to clean everything, how, what needed to be where, and his wife was more like, what colors are we going to have, what artwork is going to go into the building, furnishings, type of spaces that where people are going to be working. So it kind of was a good relationship between them two, because they wouldn't sometimes you have a client where one wants one thing and then the other one wants the other, and you can't, it's hard to resolve it because they can't resolve it within themselves. So in that case, it was they were really good clients to have.
So condominium. That's very different than the veterinary facility. How did this come up about?
So the condominium project, it's located on the west side of El Paso, and it was actually a builder that does homes, but the economy had crashed, and he wanted to try to get into a condominium project. It was hard to get. At the end, there were going to be apartments, but the idea was to do a high-rise, very dense urban project that would fit in that area. The good thing about the site, it's not a very big site, but he wanted a lot of units. But what's good about it, it's close to shopping. It's really close to Sunland Park Mall. It's close to restaurants. It's also close to some medical and some office buildings. So it was a good fit to try to put this type of facility in there and have a good mix where you could actually maybe work in that area, or if you're just there on the weekends, you can come down and then you can walk to the mall, or you can walk to go get dinner or whatever. So it's more of the idea of a pedestrian type building.
Okay, so you mentioned the crash, so what year did you do this?
Huh?
What year did you do this then?
Actually, I started this about 3-4 years ago, and it was held up, and then we're barely starting construction right now.
Oh.
So sometimes you start a project, and you think you're going to finish it, and then you stop, and you go, and you stop, and you go. But that just, you have to deal with those kind of issues.
Okay.
So the idea again was to create this courtyard. It just helped to organize the space again, but we pushed the parking to the back because we didn't want. We always have this parking lot in front of all these buildings, but they're really not nice spaces to be in and walk around in. And there was also these adjacent buildings that were, let's say, to the left of the project. And we wanted to tie into that fenestration or those massing so that it seemed almost like one big project. And then the other thing we did was that there was a green space, we expanded that green space towards in front. So when you visit this building off the street, you really don't see the parking. You see a green space, then you see the entrance, and then behind you have the courtyard that ties everything together. So as far as the architecture, I was just playing with this idea of these forms to try to create shadows, colors, textures, all this. And I was trying to tie it back to the Southwest type of architecture that we have, here, tied back to our climate and what we do. And so, and having the courtyard is kind of like another microclimate about, for whoever lives has a nice space to kind of congregate. So I was talking, the lobby and all the rooms all overlook this have balconies, and they all overlook into the plaza or the courtyard area. This kind of what it looks like, the lobby area looking towards the courtyard. This is the courtyard here. So as you can see, it's a series of balconies all looking into that with a pool and water element, some landscaping. Tying that back to from the allotment again.
Okay. So, how was it working? This is a completely different client experience. This is a developer who.
Yeah,
our idea of the developer is all he cares about is making money. So.
You know what? The client. Yeah, the big issue here was always money. Or not, what is this going to cost me? What am I going to do? So we actually went through different renditions, like changing window sizes, changing materials for the balcony instead of glass. We went to another. So you have to be very creative and say, okay, try to kind of stick to your guns and say, okay, I understand you have this, but we still need a rail. So can we find a solution or a nice design that's going to, still have this rail, but it's not pure vision, but you're still trying to at least respect the concept that you had and the idea of these forms and the shades and the shadows and the form that you're trying to create. Another different project. As you can see, I work on all sorts of projects because here in El Paso, if you're a small firm, you cannot just work on one type of project. You got to kind of work with whatever falls in your lap. So this next one was Hacienda de Paz. They were a completely different client. It was a older couple, and it was going to be kind of their dream home that they were always thinking about, for years, and that they're going to probably live there maybe 20, 30 years, and maybe that's it. But anyways, it was out in the valley. And they wanted something that would reflect kind of their memories as children living in Mexico. And so the idea of creating this hacienda style / adobe home came about. And that kind of was the starting point of. So again, thinking of that idea of the hacienda and the patio, we started talking about that to design this, and so we came up with some sketches, and the concept was going to be a series of pods or buildings that would embody these experiences or activities that a couple wanted to do in the home. So from that conceptual kind of just idea, we started playing with the forms and making sure it's a modern building, but it still ties back to their culture by the way we use materials and the way things are fenestrated on the building. But it's still not, you know, a true hacienda home. It still has a flair or a different type of architecture, you know, more modern architecture.
You mentioned adobe, so did you guys use adobe, or was that just kind of like the starting point?
We looked at different options. Unfortunately, with this project, it's kind of on hold right now. It's on hold right now because the clients fell in love with the idea, but to do the adobe, unfortunately, you can't find that here in El Paso anymore, or you can't even find it in Juarez. And that used to be like a big material that used to be used here at the border. But the only place you could find it is up in Santa Fe. And so to ship, you know, adobe or Las Cruces, it was super expensive. So one of the ideas that we were looking at is either doing hay bale or just doing stick frame, which I don't really want to do stick frame. So we're still kind of up in the air, and who knows if they are really going to do that. And that happens sometimes, that you get hired to do a project, and at the end, you know, they decide that, you know, it's too expensive for them to do, or we have to change and redesign and do something different. So I was talking about basically, there's these pods. So basically, it's kind of the different experience. She cooks a lot, and she actually gives lessons on you know, cooking and dishes, and she does these modern Mexican dishes. So part of it is learning and how you learn it, and food was a big part of kind of their experience. So one was to teach other people about, you know, her culture and the way she taught. There's a pod that they wanted to do to teach, so she could teach. And then there was actually the kitchen, if you could see it over here, in this area. It's almost half, or almost bigger than any of these areas. The whole kitchen's like that, so it's going to be a big gathering place. So that was very important to the client. And of course, then we have the, you know, like relaxation area, guest area, and of course the courtyard, you know, that would connect all these individual buildings, and then have the, you know, water element that's kind of life, and how life, you know, rotates around, you know, family and friends. And so that was kind of the idea.
So they planned on having lots of guests over?
Yeah.
Is that how it just came about?
That was what came in, at least grandchildren, and have their family come in and stay with them and whatnot.
So which ones are their main residence?
So their main residence is this. It's actually almost like if you go to a spa, they have their own like secluded room or space that they could go and retreat, and all this could just be family and friends or whatever. So,
oh, that's a great idea.
all right. And these are kind of images that we were generating as far as what this might look like if you're standing inside the garden or the plaza area. So, my next.
I'm sure some of the students recognize this one. So I've heard.
No, it's not. So this next project is Pocket Village and Fun that I work on. It's on the northeast. And the client, before the client wanted to do this pockets out there, but they didn't know where to do it. So we went about looking at different properties to see, you know, which would be the best fit, because they wanted just to retrofit. They didn't want to build anything new. There was a lot of vacant buildings out in that area, and this was let me back there. So this is what I first saw when I went out there. It was an old Loop Center next to Kmart, done in the 1970s, 1960s, and the client was, really? You think that's a good building? That was his first reaction. But when I saw it, I thought, you know what, this is a good fit. Had a lot of parking, which they wanted a lot of parking. They were going to be able to negotiate with Kmart to lease the space, and probably a very, very reasonable rate. And the other thing was that it had a very open space on the inside, So there were very few little columns on the inside, so it would help with the type of design that they wanted to do, and their structure was very sound. But as you could see, it was, I mean, if you look at it, it was junk. I mean, what can you do there, right?
Yeah. So is Kmart still there?
Yeah, Kmart's still there.
Okay, and you guys took over the lube area?
Where they used to have I think it was a tire center or lube center or something like that. Yeah.
Is that the one right off Montana?
Yeah, right off Montana.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I need to know where to go play.
So what we did at the one of the major concerns with the owner was to draw people to this to the pockets, you know, to the restaurant, billiards bar, or whatever. And so the first thing that we did was relocate the entrance that used to be facing Montana to the side, and created again a courtyard or a patio area that would draw, you know, clients and patrons back into the billiards area. So that was one of the things that we really did. And the other thing was that we tried to respect the structure that was there, because that's probably the most expensive part of this. And we tried to kind of emphasize the structure. So here we're just kind of looking at different options where the signage is going to go and how we were going to draw that. And at the end it turned out that the best place for it was close to the street off of the patio area. So a very simple project, you know, that kind of helped me organize the space. We pushed the kitchen and everything that's just work areas or whatever towards the back. And then the next space was going to be the bar and kind of the restaurant area, then the billiards area in between the patio and that would cause like movement inside the building. So when you're in there, people are always moving back and forth. So your architecture could also help kind of orient and have people move and create an atmosphere about you know, what the client wants, so that, you know, people enjoy being there. There's kind of some images of what it turned out. So
We haven't talked about the client much. What was your experience once you told him this is the place, and he said, "Holy Moses"? Was he really into the creative process?
Well,
that?
The first reaction was, I don't see it, right? I don't see why do you like this? So the first step was always to come up with like schematically of so these images that you saw is that what we showed our client, the first part of it. And that's when he bought into it. He said, yeah, that's a great idea. I think I could see this working. And he also saw the economic aspect of it, that he wasn't going to have to put it. As a matter of fact, I think he's like, but between 50 and 60 bucks a square foot, which is nothing really.
Yeah, that is pretty cheap.
So most of it was paint, some detail work, and so he was really happy at the end because he had to invest into them.
Wow, great. Okay.
Hello? Okay, so he...
No. Oh, she says it's a lot.
It's what? No? Okay. I think it was the patio area was really successful. People really enjoy it. We have great weather here in El Paso, and as drive through Montana, it really draws your eye and say, hey, that's a cool place, let's go check it out. And I think it already had a name for itself as far as the clientele, and it really helped.
So what do you got next? Sun orthodontist in Corpus. How did you end up in Corpus Christi?
I actually had this client that had done a tenant improvement here in El Paso. It was an orthodontics clinic, and this was actually my third project, but they really liked my services and what we were doing. So from there, he asked me, you know what, because they also have clinics all over Texas, and he said, you know what, we're going to do a project in Corpus Christi. You want to do that for us? I said, yeah, sure. You know, let's go. So I would fly in and out to San Antonio and go back and forth every month while we were doing this project. So I went out there, and the idea here that was it traces I-10 Corpus Christi going towards Padre Islands, but nobody would notice this building. And the client was concerned about how he was going to get people to come into the building, again, draw you in. And the other thing was the functionality of the building. It's just a box, but he has a lot of technology that he puts into what he does, and he wanted to make sure that everything flowed. So those were the two major concerns that the client had at that time. So as I was talking about, here's that was the main challenge. So this is what the building looked like when I first came up. So he was like, what do? You know, it's just a box and it has a really dinky entrance. It's very short. And so that was my challenge right there. So here's some more images of what this building looked like. Very, not much to work with. So the first thing I did, again, I went back to what I like to do, and I wanted to set back a portion of the building because they didn't really want to mess with the structure. So we did a notch in the middle and kind of created this courtyard again, this courtyard idea, this transitional space that people could use to draw you in. So that was kind of off the bat, that's what I started thinking about, without even knowing what I was going to do with the facade. So the next thing was, I started to explore what can we do with this box, what can we add to it to draw interest to the building off the interstate. So here are some kind of renditions, different options about, you know, what could happen, having a tower at the corner, or doing a second story, or moving the tower kind of in the middle, playing with different materials, covering the courtyard, not covering it, and we're at the same time kind of looking at the budget as far as, can we do this, can we not, you know, that kind of thing. So at the end, this was kind of one of the final kind of renderings of what we did. We decided we wanted to have a glass tower at one end that would have the name, that would be, that people would be drawn to, and then when you were there, you were drawn right into the entrance, and you were kind of had that intermediate space before you actually walked into them. And we did just a couple of moves on the building, and it really dressed it up, and you know. So here's what it is right now. It's under construction. It's almost finished. It's a couple of months back. As you can see, the glass tower is gone. Again, budget always drives it, but at least conceptually, we kept the same idea and try to keep that so that it still draws people in. It has signage above, and so that's what it's looking like. And so in floor plan, after that, as you enter into the courtyard, it kind of happened that the same thing, like the public areas are towards the front and the more private areas are towards the back. And in the middle you have all the space where it's public and private, you know, the chairs for the dental chairs, the offices, and whatnot. And it kind of all flows in a circular motion to the front and to the back, and it goes back outside. So the doctor was really happy about how everything would function in there and how he was going to be able to give a better care to his clients.
So look, I take it he was really easy to work with as far as...
No. He was, I guess sometimes doctors tend to be kind of arrogant, okay? That's the word.
Any doctors in here?
I hope there are no doctors in the room. Not all of them, but he seemed to, you know, they do a lot of study and they know a little bit about everything. And so they're pretty opinionated about what they do. So you have to be very careful about, you know, how you approach them. And that's fine. You always have, sometimes you have to work with really hard clients. But at the end, after, you know, going through various changes and moving, he was happy at the end of how it turned out. One of the things that was kind of very important to him is that his doctors don't walk up and down to one side of the building and back to the other. So we had these clusters of areas that so if a doctor was in one area, he pretty much just stayed in that area because they get tired of going from one side of the clinic to the other. So that was one of his big pet peeves, and they always lose a lot of time, you know, walking all the way to the other side and then walking all the way back and talking to the patient. So he wanted to bring the patients in as quickly as possible and get them out as quickly as possible. The best service. Here are some interior shots of what the clinic looks like. And he has someone here in El Paso, so some of you might already have seen this. And again, here's the kind of final rendering of how that turned out.
So, what is this mixed-use building where?
This is at the Union Plaza downtown, the heart of El Paso. All that area, you guys probably already been there, you know, that has all the bars and restaurants and whatnot. So I worked on a project was in front of it, and now I'm working on this one. And we're trying to revitalize that area. So one of the things was to just kind of, the client, what he wants to do is have retail at the bottom and then some efficiency apartments. And it was important to him to make some kind of connection. He also owns the other buildings behind. So he wanted to have somehow make a connection. He had a basement area, and he wanted to take advantage of the space that was in the basement. So those were the challenges, the only thing that the client wanted. And of course, being in El Paso, budget was a big issue with him, you know, for them. It was that group of people. So here's what the building actually looks like right now. We started construction, but this was the way I found it when I looked at it. It's pretty drab. It still has a really nice architectural features as far as historical. This building was done in the 1920s. I did a little research about, you know, who did it, what had happened, and it's always been a mixed-use project where they had some efficiency apartments above, probably people that used to work in that area in the 1900s, and also retail. And I think at the time, I'm not sure, it's been different things, but it was a tire shop at one time, and it was a furniture store. But for years, it sat like that, nobody occupying it, and so we're trying to revitalize that. So this is the existing building. As you can see, there's two in the back, the sides here in the front. And so the idea again is that we thought, you know what, all these buildings have basement. Why don't we do a sunken courtyard right in between the buildings? And that way that became that kind of the connecting element between the old buildings, between all these buildings which they own, and they were able to pick up additional square footage for rental space. And also it would make a really nice feature that will draw people to their buildings and as a lease, you know, to lease it.
So then you're working on this entire block?
I'm working on the entire block right now. But right now the main thing that we first started with was the patio in the building. So the main challenge here was that I wanted to respect the building as far as the front of the building, because it was already a really nice building. So all we did really, or all we're doing, is replacing the windows and the fenestration as far as the windows, and then we added a Texas canopy. Why a Texas canopy gives you that sense of shelter, and also it draws you to the lease spaces or to the retail spaces. And also it's almost like an eyebrow and broke the building up. So those were the only things that we did here to the front, kind of cleaned up the building and opened it up so that people could enjoy it. And then the other thing is that we worked on the courtyard. We had different ideas about what we were going to do at the courtyard. We actually added a catwalk in the back to increase the square footage of the apartments. And so that, with all that said and done, this kind of the image of the second courtyard with the catwalks above for the apartments, so they could kind of look down into the activity and whatever partying or whatever is going on down there. So that's kind of the sticking point. And as you can tell, at the bottom there's some retail space right here at the bottom that they're now going to be able to do, and also on this side.
And when will we see this?
Probably early next year. This will be ready.
Archetype.
So here's an image of the sunken courtyard again, adding, as I started, with the water element, you know, some landscaping, and you know, and still having that relationship between buildings and having that blurring effect between interior and exterior space.
A warehouse now?
Yeah, so now here's the next project I'm working on is a warehouse, completely different from everything else. The only thing the owner wanted was, he had a program about 40,000 square foot of space, of warehouse space. He wanted some office space. He wanted the dock area. He didn't know how that was going to work, and he had a piece of land. So that's it. So he didn't know what he wanted to do, and I offered to do a series of options of what we could do to the property. So I started with a series of sketches, you know, one with a big building in the middle with docks on either side, one with offices in the middle with the warehouses to the right and then parking, and then one where it was just this long, almost like a shopping center deal with the docks all in the back. At the end, we didn't even do any of these, but that was kind of what we started.
Process, right?
Part of the process. So that I just kind of started looking at all of that. So here again, from there we started looking at those like closely and actually doing some more in-depth drawing based on scale and whatnot. So here's the two warehouses and then the office in the middle. And then here's the two warehouses together, making one big warehouse with the office on top, parking in the front, and then the docks on either side. And then here's kind of like, let's try this, put a little bit of parking in the front, some to the side, and then still offices. Well, none of these was still the solution. At the end, this is the solution. What we decided to do, or what I decided to do was, you know, still have the dock in the middle because it would be less expensive to have the dock area in the middle, parking's to the side, and then having the two offices in the front. But one thing that we added because we were increasing the square footage was to add this plaza in the middle that would be the connecting element between the two different buildings. The other reason, the courtyard, back to the courtyard, yeah. So the other reason that was important was that he wanted it from the front, which is on Zaragoza, the interstate here. He wanted that image from the front not to read like a warehouse, but to read almost like an office building. And he wanted it to be kind of like one big building, but he wanted to split into two warehouses where he would take half and the other one he could lease. So that was kind of, and he really liked that idea, so that's how we went ahead and approached that. So the next step is that we actually did a series of mass models or massings to see what this might look like, and we actually went through a lot of variations about what that might be. But here we are, here at the end, here at the bottom. That's what the building's actually going to look like. We're letting a lot of natural light come into the warehouse and also into the office spaces. And we have this plaza that's kind of right at the middle that will kind of greet people as they come in from the parking areas, and then you can either choose to go right or left depending on who you're there to visit. So again, the idea of the courtyard, you know, as the tying element between these two buildings, and then a covered kind of patio area that kind of intersects and connects the whole building together. Well, and that's it. Those are all the projects I have today to show you guys.
If you'll stick around, we can have a question and answer.
Yeah, I'm good question.
Does anybody have any questions for that? I know somebody. Here comes Rob.
Sorry guys,
You need to turn it on. Oh, there you go. I know. Sorry about this. So, one of my biggest questions to every architect I see, my name is Robert, by the way, is have you completed your 7th test exam after you graduate?
My what?
Your 7th Are you
Oh,
registered as?
Are you registered? I'm a registered architect. Actually, I work with
I work with several firms.
here locally, And then you have to go through everything, and you learn experience as you go, and then after that I took my test. It's actually harder. I think it's easier now, but when I graduated, you had to work 5 years under an architect before you even tried to take your exams, and that's changed now. I think as soon as you graduate, you can start to try to take the exams. And when I took it, it was nine exams that we had to pass, which I think now it's like 7, but they've combined them somewhat. So yeah, I'm a registered architect, and actually I'm a young firm here in El Paso, and it's basically me and maybe a couple other people, and it's like my 6th year as a firm. So if you really want to do that and one day own your own firm and do your own kind of work, that whatever you want to do, it's possible. You just have to work really, really hard.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, put hard work. No.
Thank you, Rob.
No, any tips? And that's my last question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You can bring it down.
You hear me?
Sure.
I have a little question. I'm fast. About schedule. I know as an architect you should be very, very, very busy, but like doctors will be busy as well. They have doctor's appointments. They have
Basically, when it comes to schedules, you have to be the one that makes time for your clients. Because sometimes they are very busy, but some of them are very flexible, and they'll ask you, hey, when are you available? Or you have to tell them, you know what, I have another meeting at this time. What do you think about this time? But you do need to be, especially me as a small firm, I'm very hands-on, and I always try to meet with my clients and talk to them and to make time for them, because I want them to be part of the process. And I think it helps me to do better architecture when you let them be part of that process and invite them in from the very beginning, because they feel like they're part owners of the project, and they actually will defend it when it comes to the construction time, and they won't try to cut corners or do this, because if they fall in love with the project that you're doing, they're more willing to do a better job as far as the type of building that they do.
and I know that like doctors have a lot of money as well, but then they have like, I want the building done by this date, but for some reason, every time you get like appointments, he's like, no, I don't like this, no, I don't like that. After that time period that he gives you to finish your project, but what if you don't finish? You get more money for it, or?
Not in El Paso. There's some areas that you go outside of El Paso, they have, you do a contract, let's say you're going to do a casino, right? And that's a lot of money they put into it. So they put in clauses into it. You'll learn about that when you get into architecture. There's actually a business side that you also have to learn about contracts, how to negotiate and all that. So as an architect, it's not just designing, you also have to understand the business side of it. So what they do is they put in a clause in there that you say, you know, if I finish by this time, because they're hurried, they have money tied up to do that project. But usually they do that with the contractors. They don't do that with the architects. It's what they call soft money or soft cost. It's not the full amount, but if they're hurried to do something and finish it, and you tell them, okay, I'm going to finish it at this amount. My contract's going to be for 8 months. But if I can finish it in 4 months, you're going to give me a bonus because I'm going to be able to do it for you. You know, you could work that into it. Nobody here in El Paso will ever do that with you. But maybe in a bigger city that, you know, money's a bigger issue in that time, but they also want high quality. So then you have to hire more people, have more expertise in there, and be able to produce more. I hope that answers your question. I won't let you talk.
I wanted to ask you, like, since you designed in different cities, when you go from city to city, when you design, do you design based on what is in the city, or you just design like what do you want, like whatever you want it how to look like, or do you actually try to make the buildings design fit in with the city and the surroundings, like if it's next to an ocean or something like that?
That's an excellent question. Look, I think there's a lot of factors. You know, you could be a really renowned architect and you do whatever you know and you want to do. But when you start off, you have to deal with clients and you have to deal with budgets. I mean, if we have $500 a square foot budget, and I could go crazy and do something really spectacular. But what I try to do, at least here in El Paso, is that I'm always thinking about the design, but I'm also thinking about the space in between buildings, how that building is addressing the street or the neighborhood, or you're adjacent to it. So it depends. To me, it depends on the project and the client, and what you're trying to achieve with the budget that you have. Unfortunately, it does come out to that, but when you're a student or you're here learning about architecture, you shouldn't be thinking about that, because you want to be a good designer. But as a good designer, then you know kind of what to eliminate and what to leave in your design. That's the essence about what you want to do, and the rest, could go away, because it's just.
It's cool, but you don't have to do
all that,
You have to be flexible to work with your clients.
Yeah, you gotta
Not right now. I think you just need to, explore and understand all that. Not at this point.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Nobody wants to ask the last question? No? Yeah. Like you were saying, the project you were doing for the Hacienda, you said for budget it didn't continue to get the construction, right? So you haven't been able to complete that work, because of the budget, the shipping.
Yeah.
What did you do in those situations? Like, what?
I think the client really liked the project and wants to do it that way, or they would have to cut or maybe phase it in and do a series of, a couple of the buildings. But I think they're waiting to do it right, or not do it at all. I mean, there's some clients that, they understand that, and I'm not sure, because they kind of put a halt on it. So maybe they decided, you know what, we're going to spend all this money, go buy another house, and we're not going to, I don't know, I'm not sure yet what they're going to do. But that happens sometimes, sometimes you start a project, you don't finish it, it's over, over budget. I had warned them in the beginning, that they had to be careful about the decisions that they make, because they're also part of the design process. But at the end, that's what happens, and they still have options, but it's going to be up to the client at that point, if they're going to build it or not.
Thank you.
When you're doing your space planning, have you found that the new handheld technologies, that it's trending to a different type of office environment? For example, I was in DC for a couple of days this past summer, and I wound up in Beto O'Rourke's office.
Yes.
And when his intern was showing me around his office, which was, unfortunately kind of small because he's a low-level guy, there was no desk. I thought we were in the conference room. She said, no, this is his office. He made us take out the desk and the computer, and he just sits at this conference table with his iPad and sees everyone that way.
You know what? It depends on the type of firm and the type of work that they're doing. So when you get out,
and you're looking at different firms
to see what's the best,
for you,
they will
they will all have different.
work environments, and it also kind of reflects the type of architecture that they do. So some of them are very loose and very creative, but let's say you're working for a firm that just does hospital work, where it has to be more precise and it has to be more about functionality. Then it's going to be a different work environment. They might not want that loosey-goosey kind of, you're free to do what you want to do. But like Google, or somebody like that, those type of firms, they're all about creativity. So it's an advantage to do that. So it just depends on who you're working for and what their end goal is and the type of work that they're producing. But it is a valid point, and it works. And it does work, but I think if that's the type of person that you are and you like that type of environment, you need to find a firm that also has that same mentality about their work and what they're trying to produce.
So you haven't seen a general trend just yet?
proposed.
I haven't seen a general trend in the architecture world that.
Actually, there are.
There
There
is
is a trend coming up, and a lot of businesses, but it depends on the business, and like what I was saying, it's not that a trend, I think people just realize it's a better work environment, especially if that's what they're trying to do, is be creative. So you find a lot of that like out in California, or, you know, New York, or stuff like that, but if you're just, you know, day to day, and they want you sitting there to produce something, they're probably not going to give you that type of work environment, because they're not trying to be creative, but they're trying for you to produce, you know, some work. But that is the trend that's happening right now.
Thank you very much.